So thank you again, and I just consider it such a privilege and an honor to get to be here today. Now, how many parents do we have in here? Raise your hands. Okay. Now, how many of you have parents? Raise your hands. It should be everybody, right? I mean, so this message is for everybody. Okay. So I don't know if you know it or not, but as mothers and fathers, you are important. You are so valuable to your children. I don't think you realize how much your presence and your words and your love mean everything to your children. And the reason that it's that way is God set it up that way because He wants you as parents to be powerful communicators of who He is to your children, to be a reflection of Him, to show them what a loving Heavenly Father is like. And so He set this up this way for you to be that reflection of Father God. You have that distinct ability to do that for your children. And you know, our greatest calling in life really is to make disciples of our children. There is no greater thing you can do in your life than to show your children the love of God and your own love. And you know, that is you have that distinct ability to introduce your kids to God through your behavior and actions and words. Now, we're going to talk here a little bit about mothers, and then we're going to talk about fathers, but I want to just say this, that God really put a very high calling on fathers to train up their children in the way they should go. It says so in Ephesians 6:4. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And then in Colossians 3:21, it tells us, fathers, do not provoke or irritate, this is the Amplified, do not provoke or irritate or exasperate your children so that they will not lose heart and become discouraged and unmotivated with their spirits broken. Now, who is He addressing there? Fathers. You notice He didn't give that responsibility to mothers. And yet, who often is the one who does it? The mothers. And why is that? I think it's because I don't think fathers truly understand how important they are in their role and what they can do for their children. And you know, a lot of times Johnny, he gets to be about 12 years of age, and he says, well, I want to be a man like my daddy. But he said, you know, Daddy doesn't go to church, and Daddy doesn't read his Bible, so I don't have to either. And then they get to thinking that church is really only for women. And so they just don't keep going, and then that's why women outnumber men in most congregations. And this is not to say that mothers are not important. Of course they are, and God bless all the mothers who stood there and did the job. Sometimes when their husbands or fathers weren't doing their job, because I don't think they knew. In our society, men weren't even allowed in the room back in the day. Harold wasn't even allowed to watch Jeremy be born. Men weren't allowed back in there when they were born. And I think we just kind of always separated the men from the kids in a way. Like we've, that's the woman's job, that's the mother's job, to raise the children. And it's kind of sad because we've lost a very important thing in their life is to have that with their dads. Each one does different things, and we're going to talk about that. So mothers teach us unconditional love and acceptance and mercy. And they teach us, they're comforters and nurturers. But now, if a child wants to do something adventurous or dangerous, they don't go to mom, they go to dad. But when they're hurt, when they skin their knee or cut their finger or someone's hurt their feelings, who do they go to? They go to mom. Because they know mom is going to, love them and comfort them and nurture them. Even wounded and dying soldiers on the battlefield have been known to cry out for their mothers moments before they go. And so mothers, of course, when we're hurt, or if we have exciting news to share, we go to mom. Because we know moms are our biggest fans, they're our biggest cheerleaders, they're always being that role for us. And so, mothers have such a huge and powerful and important assignment in our child's life. It cannot be understated. You probably all heard that joke that says, if you want to know where Johnny's homework assignment is, or what his homework assignment is, or when his doctor's appointment is, or where his vaccine records are, or anything of any importance to the child, you go to mom. Dads are vaguely aware that there are children running around the room. And for many years, this really has been how it was. But thank God, this is changing. I see more and more dads these days, in the last 2 generations even, really playing an active role in the care and raising of their children. Even changing diapers and feeding them. And I think this is so amazing because when you think about, I think about that scripture in Malachi, the last 2 verses of Malachi, that says, "Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the great and coming day of the Lord. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the father, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse." So, I believe we are seeing this happen where the hearts of the fathers are turning to their children. And I think it's so wonderful. I'm just so amazed. Because you see, what a father does for their child is help establish their identity. If a boy learns if he is a man and if he has what it takes from his dad. And a girl learns if she is worth pursuing, if she is lovely, if she is worth fighting for from her dad. It's just how God set things up. We all want to be loved and accepted. But more than anything, we want that from our parents. Receiving or not receiving our parents' approval, affects us all of our lives. God's message is one of love and acceptance and belonging and value, where the enemy's message he wants to impart to your children is that they're worthless, they have no value, they're nothing. And so we've got to, as parents, realize the importance of getting God's message to our children. And one of the really good ways to do that is through what I call the power of a parent's blessing. That's the name of my title, the title of my message. And understanding this power of a parent's blessing is so important that it's basically been stolen from our culture. We don't really know that, but it's a very biblical principle, and one that we should put back in our culture. So in Genesis, we have the stories of Abraham blessing Isaac, and Isaac blessing Jacob, and Jacob blessing his 12 sons, including Joseph's 2 sons. But you may remember also where Jacob stole Esau's blessing. He deceived Isaac and got the blessing. And so we're picking up the story in Genesis chapter 27, where Esau just finds out that this has happened. And he said, when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But Isaac said, "Your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing." And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. First he took away my birthright, and now look, he's taken away my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved the blessing for me?" Then Isaac answered and said, "Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Have you only one blessing, O my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father." And Esau lifted his voice and wept. 4 times he begged for a blessing, and he was devastated in not getting it. And so we can see how important in those days and that day what a father's blessing was. And, Esau wasn't upset about losing his birthright, but he was devastated about losing the blessing. The birthright was the inheritance reserved for the firstborn, but the blessing really helped. It was a prophetic blessing, and it's different kind of than what I'm talking about today, because I think they imparted not only identity, but destiny. It was a prophetic blessing of what they would do and have and be. And I know it's a little different from what I'm talking about today, but the principle of receiving a blessing is still just as powerful today as it was then. In fact, the power of a parent's blessing is so important that even Jesus didn't perform one miracle or teach preach one message without receiving his Father's blessing at his baptism. What did God say? This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. There are all the components of a blessing. And then he got it again at the Mount of Transfiguration. He said, this is my beloved Son, hear ye him. So first of all, he's expressing belonging. This is my Son. And then love, my beloved Son. And then he's saying that he has value. Hear ye him. He's worth listening to. So these are, again, the elements of a blessing: to impart love, value, acceptance, and belonging. I love you. You're my child. I think you're terrific. I'm so proud of you. And God intended for every child, really, to grow up in an atmosphere where they're constantly hearing these things. And many cultures have in place several times throughout a child's life where they impart a blessing. So, like even in the womb, at their birth, at their bar mitzvah, or whatever kind of ceremony they may go through when they establish them as a man or a woman. And, at their weddings, there are several times in a child's life when receiving a blessing could be such a valuable thing. And yet we don't tend to do that here. I don't know. I don't see it. But I know that it happens in a lot of other cultures. And throughout Scripture, we see Hebrew parents blessing their children. And the Jewish people have this down. Every Friday night, they have a meal together as a family. And at the end of the meal, the father gets up and he lays his hands on his wife and he blesses her. And then he goes around the table and blesses each one of his children. And, and then on Sabbath, when they go to synagogue, they get another blessing from the rabbi. So they really live in a culture of being blessed all the time. So it's no wonder that Jewish people everywhere thrive and prosper. Financially, educationally, and in their family relationships, they seem to do better than anyone else in the culture around them. It doesn't matter what city or country they're living in. Jewish people tend to prosper above others in the culture. In his book, The Jewish Phenomenon, by Stephen Silviger, he writes that Jews make up only 2% of the American population, yet 40% of the top 40 of the Forbes 400 richest Americans are Jewish. 1/3 of American multimillionaires are Jewish. 20% of professors at leading universities are Jewish. 40% of partners at leading law firms in New York and Washington, D.C. are Jewish. Get a look at this one. 30% of American Nobel Prize winners in science are Jewish. That 25% of all Nobel Prize winners in America are Jewish. How could such a small percentage, 2% of the American population, account for such a large percentage of wealth and influence? I mean, they dominate in the world of finance, education, science, medicine, inventions. You have to wonder, why is that? Could it be one reason? I'm sure there are more. But could it be that one reason is because every week they're getting blessed by their fathers? 3 John 2 says, Beloved, I wish above in all things that you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. Could it be that this blessing they get every week from their fathers is blessing their soul? And so their soul is prospering, therefore they're prospering. I believe that's a very key factor. Not the only one, but a key one. So Burt Reynolds told an interviewer once, he said, they have a saying down south that goes like this: until your pappy calls you a man, you don't feel like a man. And mine never did, and I never have. He said, I've raced cars, I've boxed, I've done everything I could to get my father's approval, but I just never quite make it with my dad. Isn't that a tragedy? I don't know why anybody would withhold that from their children. And the deal is a relationship with your father can directly affect your relationship with God the Father, with your Heavenly Father. Because a loving Heavenly Father has no meaning if you don't know a loving earthly father. And the fact that 1 out of 3 kids in America is growing up without a father is not a coincidence. The devil knows the power and role that dads have, and he wants them to be disconnected and absent and distant or abusive, so that their children will start out life not only without a father's blessing, but believing that that is how the Heavenly Father is too. The devil knows how powerful dads are, so he tries to diminish their role in society. I mean, look at the sitcoms and TVs and movies where they portray the dad as the bumbling idiot. You know, I think of Tim the Toolman Taylor and Everybody Loves Raymond, Ray. They always portray the father there as being an idiot. And yeah, we laugh, it's funny, but it's at the man's expense. Instead of honoring him for the role that he has in the family, the important role, the devil wants to diminish that. You may have heard of the author John Eldredge. He wrote the Wild at Heart series for men. In that book, he says that every boy needs the question answered, do I have what it takes? Am I adequate? And every girl needs her daddy to answer the question, am I lovely? Am I worth pursuing? Am I worth fighting for? Now, I thought it was awfully shallow for us women to have that as our question. Like, really? That's our question? But I got to thinking about it. I'm like, that really is our question. What is a beauty pageant? But the ultimate answer to that question, we do need to know these things. And, you think about the storybooks for children. What is it? We have the prince who has to slay a dragon and cross a moat and climb a tower to rescue the beautiful princess. Are we worth fighting for? Are we valuable? Are we lovely? Are we worth pursuing? This is that question. And fathers, if you don't answer that question for your daughters, then the first man who comes along and does answer it will probably have his way with her, because she will look for it elsewhere. A classic case of this is Marilyn Monroe. Years ago, a freelance reporter from the New York Times interviewed Marilyn Monroe. And she knew Marilyn's past as a young child. She went from foster home to foster home, shuffled around as a child. And so she asked Marilyn, did you ever feel loved by any of the people that you lived with? And she said, once. When I was about 7, there was the woman I was living with was putting on her makeup. She was in a real happy mood because they were going out. And so Marilyn was watching her get ready, and so she reached over and just touched her cheeks with her powder puff. And she said, for that moment, I felt loved. And why would that impart love? I mean, it was just a casual thing. It wasn't meant to, impart this warm, fuzzy feeling. It was just a very casual, small act. And yet that small act was like pouring buckets of love on a little girl starved for attention. Because she didn't get it from her daddy. She was the result of a brief affair with a married man. And the mom was mentally ill. She stabbed a woman a week after Marilyn was born. She stabs a woman in a delusional state. And so that's, why she's shuffled from one foster home to another. And then, so when she was about 8 years old, she found a picture of her dad. He was a very handsome man. And she held on to that photo as a symbol of the fatherly love she would one day spend her life desperately seeking, but never getting. Even after she became the world's most glamorous movie star. In 1952, she tracked him down. She called him. She said, I'm your daughter by Gladys. And he said, look, I'm a married man. I have a family. I don't have anything to say to you. Call my lawyer. And a friend who knew her at the time said that emotionally just crushed her from that point on. At age 8, Marilyn was in a boarding school where she was sexually assaulted. And that was the first of many times. And don't you wonder what her life would have been like if she had a father and a mother's blessing. And all this to say that it's your voice, parents, that have such an important and powerful role in your children's life. No one will have the impact on them that you do. I mean, obviously, Marilyn got lots of accolades and attention from lots of people. But she didn't get it from the 2 people she needed it from the most. Your words are powerful. You're powerful. So what is a parent's blessing? What are the components? And what is it intended to accomplish? It's designed to answer the questions every person has: who am I and why am I here? And of course, it's to impart God's message to them of their identity and destiny, which those are the questions we have. Who am I is about our identity. Why am I here is about our destiny. So the first question, again, pertains to identity, which is a person's perception of themselves. It's tied to your value. What am I worth? If you don't feel like you're worth anything, then you feel like you don't have any value and you don't know who you are. So Satan wants to impart his message that says you're a nobody, you're a nothing, you're a mistake, you shouldn't even be here. You're just using up oxygen. But God's message, would tell you, you're my child. I sent my son to die for you. I love you. And I ordained that you would be born at this exact time in history because I need you here. And you have a purpose and you have a calling. And no one can do what I have given you the opportunity and the gift and the talents to do. So we, again, want to impart God's message of identity and destiny to our children. 1 John 3:1 says, see how great a love the Father has bestowed on us that we should be called the children of God. We belong to God. He calls us his children. Do you know why kids join gangs? Because they have a deep need to feel like they belong. And if they don't feel like they belong in that all-important gang of the family, then they will seek it elsewhere. Again, mothers and fathers, you have the power to answer these all-important questions in your child's life. If you don't, they may never know. And I mean that's serious. It's that serious. And you may think, well, my kids know I love them. I show it to them all the time. And you may even be thinking about that your parents maybe never gave you a blessing, but yet you knew they loved you. And that's good that you believe they loved you. But an unspoken blessing is not a blessing. There's no blessing there. It's got to be spoken. Otherwise, it's kind of like an uncashed check. You could have money in the bank to cover it. But if you don't give it to them and they don't deposit it into their account, it doesn't do them any good. If you don't say to them what they need to hear, you're not depositing anything into their account. And just a few years ago, I had a 65-year-old man tell me that he just had the strangest sensation of, who am I and why am I here? What am I doing here? And I thought, how odd that someone who's lived to be 65 years old has not figured this out yet. And this man knew that his parents loved him, but they never told him. They never put him on their knee or hugged him or said, I love you. And I'm like, well, that's why you have that feeling that you don't know who you are. Because you never received those words of blessing. And we also don't want to keep a blessing just out of reach. And I have done this with my kids, and I'm mortified that I did it. But like if they come to you and show you something and you say, oh, well, that's great, but here's how you could have done it better. You think as a parent, you're thinking, well, I'm helping teach them. I want to show them how they can do it better. But, that's not the blessing. That's saying you weren't enough. That's saying you didn't make it. You weren't adequate because here's how you could have done it better. And so we don't want to do that anymore. And I know that there's no guarantee that if you do everything right as a parent, that your children are going to come out right, serving the Lord. Because there's a lot of factors that come into play. The devil is very good at what he does to turn our children, which is why we have to do even better. Yeah. Listen to these statistics of kids that grow up without a dad. 75% of blacks, 50% of Hispanics, and 40% of whites grow up without a dad. These kids are 5 times more likely to be poor, 10 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. And what happens oftentimes is that someone will step in and be a mentor to them, but it's usually never in a good way. It's usually mentoring them in the way they should not go. Most of you have heard of Bill Glass. About 25 years ago, he came and held a Bill Glass crusade in Porter. He's a Christian, but he's also has done prison ministry for about 40 years. And he's been in over 2,000 prisons. And he's learned in the work of his ministry how a lack of these kinds of blessings and role models in a child's life leads to, all the statistics we hear about. The at-risk youth, the rampant drug and alcohol abuse, overfilled jails and prisons. He says that 70% of long-term inmates grew up without a father. 75% of adolescent murderers grew up without a father. He was in prison in Florida and asked how many people in the Florida penal system. There's 60,000 inmates in Florida. Only 13 were Jewish. There were a lot of Baptists and Methodists and Pentecostals and every other religion, but only 13 Jewish in the whole state of Florida. Again, you wonder. Bill Glass also tells the story. He had been in a maximum security prison in Arkansas, and there were 44 inmates on death row. And he went cell to cell talking to each one of them, and when he asked them about their father, they all hated them. They loved their mothers. The mothers were doing it right, but they hated their fathers. See, again, it tells you just how important a dad is in a child's life. You know, perhaps you're a single mother trying to raise your kids, and you say, well, what am I to do? I can't be the dad. You know, and if their dads truly aren't around, I mean, if they're really not in the picture, or, you know, they would never give a blessing like this, then find someone who will. A godly grandfather, an uncle, a coach, a teacher, a pastor, a youth leader, somebody who would step in and give them a fatherly blessing and love them like a father. But don't hesitate to ask the dads. If you're a single mom and the dad is around, what would it hurt to ask if he would do it, you know? And if they have a dad, they have a dad. Even if he's not living in the home, he's, you know, it's a little different there. And I encourage anyone to get the book. I have it right here, The Power of a Parent's Blessing. That's where a lot of this material comes from. He also has another book about how to do a Christian bar mitzvah. And I think that is the coolest thing ever because, you know, in our society, when does a man or a woman become a man or a woman? Is there a certain age that happens? Is there an event that makes it happen? Is it when they learn how to drive, when they turn 18, when they graduate, when they go off to college, when they move out on their own, when they get married? When is it? Nobody knows. And so I love this idea of the bar mitzvah, or in this case, a Christian bar mitzvah, where you have a ceremony. The Jews, you know, when a child was 13, I believe now, in the Bible I think it was 12, which is why Jesus was in the temple at 12. You know, he knew he was already a man. And thinking like a man, he said, I must be about my Father's business. But these children go through this ceremony where the whole people are around, and they're welcoming them into, you know, manhood, and they go through the ceremony and they bless them. It's a big deal. I've been at the Western Wall in Israel when there's bar mitzvahs going on. It's a big deal. And then this child starts putting away childish things and starts thinking like a man and starts having more responsibilities like a man and starts having more privileges and things like that. I think it's such a great thing, and I think we should be doing that. And, you know, why wouldn't Christians have just as high a success rate as the Jewish people are having? We should have more. And I think that would be something that would really help our boys. And the girls, too. The girls, they have a bat mitzvah for girls. The same thing. They need it, too. So I want to tell you the story that Bill Glass tells in this book. So this man he's a dad, and he has 3 daughters. One's a 2-year-old, and the other are 10 and 12. So he always, every week, he took the 10 and 12-year-old on a date with Daddy, and he would bless them. So they would come home, you know, every week and brag about what Daddy told them that week. Well, the 2-year-old's finally getting old enough to understand what's going on, and she says, well, I want to go on a date with Daddy. I want a blessing. And the dad said, well, honey, you're only 2 years old. When you get a little older, we'll do it. And she said, no, I want a blessing now. I want to go now. So he said, okay, let's go. So he took her to McDonald's, and they had an egg McMuffin. And then he reached across the table and took her hand and told her how much he loved her and how wonderful she was, and, you know, said several things. And then he was pulling his hands back, and she said, more, Daddy, more. So then he said a few more things. You know, I like how you get along with your sisters, and I'm so proud of you, how you obey your mother. And so then he started pulling away again, and she said, longer, Daddy, longer. You just can't overdo it, right? You know, and it's a simple fact that it's hard to give something you've never received. Many parents have never given their children a blessing they didn't know about. And, you know, if your father didn't bless you or answer your questions, then there's a wound there. And, you know, maybe your dad took off when you were young. Maybe he died when you were young. Maybe he died before he ever got a chance to give you a blessing. maybe instead of a blessing, he cursed you. There are no perfect parents. And so we just have to forgive the parents and ask God to tell us what he says about us.
Yeah.
And be prepared to be blown away when you do that. And if you hear anything negative, you didn't hear God. Because he will tell you how much he loves you and how proud he is of you. But if your parents are still alive, why not go to them and ask them for a blessing? And if they won't, go and find someone who will. And in a minute, we're going to have some people come up who are prepared to give you a blessing, a mothers and a father. Sometimes it's the mothers that were the problem. I have a very close friend whose mother hated her, tried to kill her. And so her wound was with her mother, not her dad. And so we'll have women up here too to also give a mother's blessing if you need that. Every church should be filled with substitute fathers and mothers for kids and people. We should all have mentors and be mentoring others. But again, find someone, maybe a father-in-law, maybe a pastor, someone that you would be like a spiritual father to you, and get that blessing. Perhaps you're a parent who realizes you haven't been blessing your children and you're seeing the fruit of it in their lives. Maybe, again, you didn't get it from your parents, but they didn't get it either. Chances are. So, and some of you may be estranged from your children. I want to tell you a story about when we first learned this about 8 years ago. I taught this at another church. And so we went to each of our sons and blessed them. We did a little ceremony, we had a meal, we gave them a gift, and gave them our blessing, both of us. Now, Harold's oldest son from his first marriage was not in a good place. He was on drugs, he was in and out of jail or prison all the time. And their relationship was very rocky. For a while, they never even talked to each other. But at this point, they were at least talking to each other, but the relationship was very strained. But he went and gave Doug this blessing. I'm telling you the difference in that man. Ned has not stopped talking about the day he got his daddy's blessing. And shortly after that, he was able to get off of drugs. And now he's even off of cigarettes, and he's doing so well, and their relationship has been so restored. And it's a blessing. I know I'm going late, but I got one more thing I want to tell you, because this is what kicked this whole thing off. I had been asked to speak at an event, and I was in bed, I was praying, Lord, please show me what I'm to speak on for this event. And that night I had this dream that I totally believe was a dream from the Lord. So I'm dreaming that I'm in like a sunny state like California, and there were people everywhere. We were outside, and there were some homeless people on the ground. Some of them were covered with blankets. And I dropped a plastic folder I was carrying, and it fell right by this woman's head. And so she kind of lifted her head up, but she only saw my feet, and when I reached out to get it, I saw who it was, and it was someone I knew. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want her to see that I'm here, because in real life, this girl's life was a mess. She was on drugs, and she was always in a bind, and she was always borrowing money and never paying it back. And it was just one sob story after another, and I knew if I let her know I was there, I was going to have to hear another sob story, and I was going to have to help her out and give her money again. But I knew I couldn't leave her there. So I reached out and called her name, and I said, what's going on? What's happening? And she got up and she hugged me, and she had been sobbing and crying, and she was sobbing and crying as she hugged me. And she had just found out that her biological father had died. And she could not stop grieving his loss. Now, I knew in real life, she had met her biological father as a grown woman, but they didn't really have a close relationship. She just hit him up for money just like she did all the rest of us, and that was probably the extent of their relationship. And so I couldn't understand why she was so upset about his death, because she didn't even grieve that much over the stepdad who did raise her and adopted her. And so I asked her, why are you so upset about this? And her answer was, because he never got a chance to tell me he loved me. And now he's gone, and I'll never hear those words. And she wasn't so much grieving the loss of the man dying as much as she was grieving hearing those words. And I believe
maybe the whole trajectory of her life would have been different had she received that father's blessing. He would have told her and that she had value because she didn't feel valued and loved. And, you know, maybe that's why she was where she was at. So, Jackie, would you go ahead and come up? I don't know if you have longed to hear those words from your parents that you're loved and wanted, and you belong to them, and they're proud of you. Maybe your parents were so abusive you don't want to hear anything from them. We're going to have some people come up. If y'all want to go ahead and come up.